Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Solo Leveling Arise video. My name is D-Free, and we're going to talk about tips. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe. And if you have any other tips for any other players that are starting after you listening to the video, things you've learned, please leave them in the comments so more people can get more info. But anyways, I have been playing the game since March through the early access. No, that was not a beta that reset our account, so I'm still pretty leveled up. So I do have a lot of experience with that being the case, and I have a lot of things that I wanted to mention to you guys as tips to help you improve with your experience. If this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe. 80% of viewers aren't subscribed, so make sure you are joining the 20%. If the video is helpful, hit that thumbs up. Get the video up to 1,500 likes. That's our goal. The first tip I have for you guys is make sure you talk to these NPCs here. This is a very easy thing to either know or forget because it's very passive, but it's a recurring way to just get a handful of soul lessons, which is not a lot, but yeah, it will add up over time. So you want to do that, and sometimes you'll see some fun characters that may or may not be released yet, like Alicia. She's not currently in the game as a playable character, but I've seen her here a couple of times, things like that. So you can just kind of go here and talk to those characters. Don't make sure you don't forget, especially if you're a budget or free-to-play player. The next tip that I have for you guys is when it comes to overall gacha pulls. Now, here's a funny thing. Things changed since I did my last, you might have seen my last tip video, right? It was a long time ago. One of the things I recommended was, hey, don't really exchange your soul lessons for the black tickets. And the reason why is because the black tickets are super accessible early game, and early mid game even. They're extremely accessible. They're all through your challenges. They're all over the place, and they're really, really easy to come by. You just need a little bit of patience, and they throw them at you all the time and all the content you can exchange for them. Anyway, now my recommendation is still mostly the same, but it's hindered on, or it hinges on, excuse me, you taking your time with the game. If you are trying to blitz through the game, then sure, that's fine. Go for it. Now, the tricky thing is the rate up banners are here. The rate up banners are going to be your individual best chance to get whatever character is featured because that is their individual best rate. However, these characters will be, like in the case of Emma, she already is, will be added here eventually. In fact, Silvermane Baekhyunho probably makes his way here today. And so basically, like a month from now when Chahayan's banner is over, she'll probably make her way into here, etc. So you can wait. The problem is that speaking of wait, the other spelling of it, wait, the waiting here is pretty bad. Dad joke right there. The waiting here is pretty bad in terms of trying to get something individually because that rate up bonus is split between 4 and you can't choose anything less than 4. So you have to choose 4. So again, that's why the individuals are the best ones. So if you have to use soul lessons here, go for it. But I generally would recommend waiting for a character you like to get their own individual spotlight banner here that you can summon on and exchange there. Now, the thing about that that's also kind of interesting is, like I said, in my initial video, it was just, hey, don't do this. Just basically don't do it. If you've ever played a gacha game, you've seen the standard banner and the limited banner. That's all this is. That's all that this is, right? But just make sure you're aware of it. And a key thing too is if the characters are getting added here, that means that this banner is never going to go away. You'll always have chances at these characters. So if you feel like, you know, you're too far away from pity, you want to save and see what's happening, what's coming, maybe you saw a good data mine or something, I don't know, you can also do that too. Now, another thing about pity here is on the rate up banners, the pity does transfer between both banners. If I did a single here, it would be 50 out of 80 for both banners, etc. They do use the same thing. And when you are in that period, you're guaranteed an SSR within this range. And you can, here's a fun way you can kind of cheese this. You can get, it starts rating up at the 64th summon. Say I did a multi here and it puts me at 59. I could just kind of sit here and then wait for the Alicia character who's releasing later today and maybe get her in the first multi after that. Like, you can kind of do cheesy stuff like that because the pity does carry over. So it's pretty nice. All right, let's move on to my next tip that I have for you guys here. Is when it comes to the gacha, you guys are going to get a lot of SR hunters and weapons. I'm here to tell you 2 things. Firstly, don't ignore them. And secondly, in the case of weapons, whether it's SR or SSR, do not salvage them. I'll talk about salvaging, but just quick tip on that, basically never salvage anything. We'll talk about that in a minute, but to explain, SSR hunters or SSR rarity characters, the highest rarity characters in any gacha game, you are typically going to want to focus on, right? That's typical hive mind mentality for these games, and that's not necessarily wrong. They are better on average. However, something funny happens with SR hunters as we're talking about these guys right now. Some of these guys are actually really good for one reason or another. For example, Kang Tae-shik Kang, whichever it is. I say Kang because Marvel. Am I wrong? I don't know. The pronunciations I am not great at. But anyway, he's really good for the bleed effect, things like that. Nam is crazy for the freezing, super useful character. We have Park Hee-jin here, super strong supporter or ultimate damage buffer character. So like these characters have their own individual uses. And then there's another layer to this game where the characters have their own individual uses, like what they can do in their team battles that you actually use these hunters in. And then they have usefulness when they're just used alongside Sung Jin-woo as a support-only character. They've got skills for that too. So some of these hunters are obviously going to be really good in various pieces of content. So don't sleep on these SR hunters. And the main thing I would like to say with these characters is if you're missing, like, if you're trying to build like a monocolored team, like full green or wind or whatever, right? Now that we're talking about Park, you could slide in one of these SR hunters to fill in, you know, as your third hunter on that team. Now, on that topic, you can also kind of just ignore the recommended colors for the most part. If you got the top hunters, they can pretty much go into any piece of content regardless of what the game is recommending you to do and beat it. Now, you may have other variants, like how good are you physically at playing the game, quote unquote skill issues, right? You may also have other variants like how advanced or built up your hunters are. Do they have artifacts, blah, blah, blah. You get all that point, right? So that's kind of how things look. So anyway, on these hunters, do not sleep on the SRs. The main ones I would mention are the ones, or the main ones that I would recommend are the ones that I did mention for today's video. However, there are some other ones that have useful use cases. Let me know what you guys think about some of them. Also, speaking of some of them, Jin-ho, he's also kind of useful, I'd say, in terms of like early game progression. So anyway, moving on from here, let's move over to the weapons. And the same deal is here with weapons. Do not sleep on these weapons. I say this like I have a bunch of SR weapons leveled up. I do not. But do not sleep on them, especially if, again, you are a budget player, free-to-play player, blah, blah, blah. Like, I have a good account, but my account's not a whale account. It's not a crazy whale account. Somebody may think otherwise, but it's not. I haven't spent very much on my account. You need to go look at an actual whale account, then come back and look at mine, and you'll see the difference. But nonetheless, some of these weapons, whale or not, are really going to help you. West Wind was nerfed, and it's still extremely strong, but it was nerfed from being arguably the best like solo weapon in the entire game as an SR weapon. Orb of Avarice is arguably the best fire elemental weapon in the game right now, which you want to have a fire weapon for the Lycans as well. And some pieces of story content. For the most part, I mean, you still probably can just go in with your double dark combo, you know, whatever it is you're doing. Maybe you're running Thetis Grimoire with Moonshadow or something like that. You can still go in and cheese content like that, but don't sleep on these SRs. The Radiru bow here is super strong as well. I personally like the Burning Demons Grimoire. I used this a decent bit as my main fire weapon until I shifted over, but I really liked it. Also, the Casca's Fang here does have the bleed on there too, so that's nice. And another thing about these SR weapons, and also for the record, R weapons, is that if you have a good main weapon, they can be a good sub weapon, and you still get the passive effects on these sub weapons. For example, say I have, let's just go with these two SRs. Say I've got the Lustrous Dragon Sword as my main, and then Radiru Bow is my secondary. And then I was able to get this passive increase for increased light damage. That's going to just extend across. It's not just for only Radiru's bow's attacks. Radiru, however you pronounce it. It's not only for that. Dude, I am so in love with the series. I've read pretty much all of it, and I still can't pronounce. Well, reading doesn't help me pronounce, but, you know, I can't pronounce nothing. So don't at me about it. I swear I'll deny it. Anyway, yeah, you still get those passives across, so don't sleep on that as a secondary weapon as well. So you can slide into some of these and use them in as I'm all over the place. The music's in my ears, my bad. You can use them as your secondary weapons. Let me turn the music down, it's kind of loud. If you haven't already, now is a perfect chance. Make sure you subscribe, and once again, post some tips down below. All right, so the reason I said don't salvage anything is pretty simple. It's tricky because the salvaging shop, exchange shop, has some good stuff in there that you would want to get. But the problem is that they constantly run these stupid events that penalize you for salvaging anything. Here's a look at one right here. So they run these events where you advance Sung Jinwoo and his weapons, or other hunters and their weapons, and you get a bonus for it. And you can cheese these events, quote unquote cheese these events, by never salvaging your weapons. Now the tricky thing is, and you know, this is where I may shift this tip. I still probably will have to test it myself, but I'm still going to recommend you guys don't salvage anything. But maybe this tip can be shifted, because the tricky thing is you will wind up in a position where, let me go here to salvage. You'll wind up in a position where, like, salvaging some of this stuff winds up being pretty damn useful, right? Like, this is one of the main ways you're going to be able to get some of these enhancement materials. You basically can get a decent bit of your investment back. Like, look at that. That may be all of my investment. Giving me 40 of those, that may be all of my investment. So, like, that's one of the tricky things, is that if you have a weapon that you absolutely just built that you hate, you don't really care for, you can do that. And then any subsequent dupes you can just, you know, get rid of there. And then when you get the other material, this thing here, you can take these to the exchange shop and get value out of it by exchanging it for other items. So that's where the tricky thing is it worth it to exchange it and get the items from the exchange shop, salvage and then get the items from the exchange shop, versus just cheesing the events and then getting the rewards that way. That's kind of something that each individual player will have to make as a, you know, as an assessment. But I even down here have all these R weapons and stuff, and what you do is you basically just hold on to them and then advance them this way. And then, as you see, I got points for that, right? So that's one of the ways you can cheese these events. Like, if I really wanted to sit here and do this for like 20 minutes, I could probably complete all the individual milestones. And this is one of the reasons why you don't really salvage much, right? So you can, once you get to this point, however, I think it's pretty safe at that point to just salvage those weapons, unless you're just going to continuously feed them into something else. But when they're fully dimensional advanced, I mean, it's just kind of whatever, right? Like, just go for it. But yeah, that's one thing you can do. Obviously, the same thing applies with the hunter weapons as well. Now, a quick other tip on hunter weapons as well, why you wouldn't want to salvage these, is because, well, hunter weapons are kind of weird, because they don't have gotchas for their SSR weapons. You have to craft all of them, at least currently anyway. So the ones that I do have are because I went out of my way to craft them, or they were given for free as part of an event or something. And so what that means is that these SR ones, and even some of the R ones, as you see I'm using them, they have an increased importance for your overall progression. If you are using a decent amount of hunters, you could sit here and consistently move the weapons and stuff around if you wanted to do that, but they overall have an increased amount of importance. So that's another reason why you may or may not want to get rid of this stuff. Now, I spent a decent bit of time talking about salvaging weapons and hunters, and which ones you should work on, which ones you shouldn't work on, which ones you should avoid. I didn't really talk much about avoidance, but if I didn't mention an SR hunter, that means that you probably should just mostly avoid them, for the record. But I wanted to kind of from here move on to something a little bit different, and that's the Army of Shadows. So Army of Shadows is an interesting thing in this game. For one, it's really annoying. You have to kind of come here consistently just to see if you've got a level up to. I'm not sure why this never gives me a red dot. I'm not sure if that's a bug or what, but it's really annoying. But do not do two things. Do not accidentally advance a shadow, right? Don't accidentally advance a shadow. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you want to do, etc. Don't go out of your way to accidentally do that. Also, when you have a shadow, be careful about using the resources to upgrade them as well if they're not a shadow you plan on using. A thing about the shadows is that only one of them has, when you build your team and you could take the 3 shadows, their own skills and stuff work, except for their passive skill. The Shadow's Authority, only the leading shadow gets theirs applied to your team. Now, that's relevant because some hunters will scale off of certain things. For example, there are hunters in the game that say, like Hwang Dong-soo or Baek-yunho, the non-Silvermane version. He will just say, uses my defensive stat to do my damage, basically. If you go read his skills, all of his skills say that. So unless there's some higher level calculation in the game that does take attack into consideration, he might as well not have an attack stat listed. And so what that means is that if a shadow like Blade says, hey, increases your team member's attack, he's not getting anything from that, right? He's not getting anything from that. Now, Tank would help him though. It's funny because Tank would help him do more damage is basically how that works, because it increases his defense. So that's one thing to consider when it comes to hunters as well. When you build your teams, just make sure you have that kind of synergy too. But with shadows, just make sure that you don't accidentally enhance one or anything like that. I mentioned that because I accidentally brought up Egress a rank, which I don't necessarily mind, but I did mind for a while because it costs a crap ton of shades, and these are traces of shadow, my bad, and these are kind of hard to get. So that's really the underlying tip here, is be careful with the trace of shadows when you get them, because they are hard to get. Okay, they're not all that easy to get, so make sure you are being sparing with those. Also, because Tusk is right here, they require those same resources to unlock your shadows. And just so you know, in order to get traces of shadows, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. You're only getting them from what? Power of Destruction, sometimes in story mode, sometimes in gates, exchange shop sometimes. Like, it's a very sporadic resource. You can't really depend on, hey, I'm going to farm 50 of these today. Like, you can't really depend on that. So be careful with how much investment you put into these shadows. Also, I'm going to keep it real with you. The shadows, it's not like they do any damage anyway. So they're here just for the passive and then for bodies. That's it. And then later on down the line, when their bodies, they'll become better because, you know, they'll be able to get other effects applied to them because some of these shadow passives or skills will be much better. But they're mainly just bodies, right? So that's kind of the thing with these guys. So my next tip is, I mentioned just a moment ago how you can get them from story, the traces. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that you don't really gain anything from not completing the story mode. I know that's really easy to kind of say and explain. Complete as much normal, hard, and reverse as you can. That's a very short and sweet one. Don't skip stuff. Just complete everything. You get all the resources. You get all the black tickets. You get experience, which is vital. I didn't talk much about experience. Vital to your progression in the game, obviously, because Sung Jinu's experience level, or his level, is what gates pretty much everything else in the game. So you want to have good levels and all that. You want to complete all your story content. So that's one of the things I want to make sure that I mentioned for you guys here. All right, so another thing too is, and we're bouncing around a lot, I was going to structure this in a more feasible way, but I was like, nah, it's cool if I just bounce around, because that way I keep you on your toes, right? Never let them guess your next move, as they say. So this is the next thing I wanted to cover. We're going to go over to the shop. Make sure you hit the shop daily so you can get your free drops here. There's going to be, like 10 soul essence here and something else in the special tab. It's nothing crazy, but it's useful, right? Also, by the way, if you are a paying player, making a few small transactions a day is actually pretty beneficial because you get all these here. So if you're willing to spend, like, you know, $3 a day or something, which does add up. Don't get me wrong, it adds up. But, like, it's worth it in my opinion. The real reason we came here is the exchange shop. Do not neglect the exchange shop, because this is extremely vital, again, to your progression in the game. And most importantly, the mana crystal exchange shop. This is an exchange shop that's kind of easy to ignore. You get mana, so there's multiple types of mana crystals, by the way. There's low tier and advanced. I think isn't there another one? Maybe not, but maybe it's just those two. Anyway, so the advanced one is used for crafting. I'm not really going to talk about crafting because crafting is just whatever, right? It's not something you're able to do very often, unless you're crafting materials, I guess. Anyway, but the reason you don't want to ignore this is for the weapon enhancement gear and artifact enhancement chips. You get these from clearing gates, and as you get more into gates, it gets really easy to get these. And so what I like to do is I like to come here and just do this, just full on max exchange. Once every couple days, get that. Once every couple days, get this. And then in between, if I need some keys and stuff, I can get the keys here too. So I can run some extra, you know, stages on those dungeons, and then obviously have an easier time trying to grind for certain materials. But do not sleep on this. And again, you get these from clearing gates. And if we go over to the gates, which I haven't done any today, personally, I don't think I needed to show you this tip or to say this tip, but make sure you always are completing gates. Make sure you're running the gates constantly. Make sure that you have typically A or S rank, because those ones are the only ones that drop the soul essence. And as you see, I just dropped 127 of those. So, like, it's extremely easy to get those. So anyway, make sure you're running those. But yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the gates, right? And make sure you're always constantly completing these, getting all your bonus drops and stuff like that for experience, etc. All right, so that is the last thing that I wanted to mention. And here's a fun one that most people should know, but some people will skip it. I've seen it before. Do your job rank quests. It's a really easy one, but I've seen people say, wait, I'm the same level as you. How did you get extra stat points? Right? Do your job rank quests. It's like, do not sleep on these at all. Maybe you didn't know this was here. Like, do not sleep on these. You get a power increase and stat points every time. Do not sleep on these, okay? So that is the final tip that I had for you guys. I wanted to keep this video not long. 20 minutes may be considered long for some people, but not for me. I didn't want it to be 30 though. If you found this video helpful, if there was any tip in this video that was useful to you, make sure you hit that thumbs up, show your support. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you wanted to see more tips like this, click the videos on the screen currently.